From the great halls of their house, there are assembled three who hope to one day be the world's greatest driving heroes. Created from the cosmic legends of the universe comes our team captain, the Vision, Bill Fisher. Their soon-to-be Wonder Woman, Vicky Fisher. Our Captain Marvel and head flight trainee, Jennifer Skripchuk. And our Batman, the master of tools, gadgets, and all things mechanical, our mild-mannered soon-to-be billionaire, Alan Danvers. Their mission, to fight injustice, share what is right and wrong, to get you out of your house and come out racing with them, and serve all mankind. They are the Garage Heroes in Training Team.
Welcome to Garage Heroes in Training Podcast. I'm going to be one of the hosts for this episode. My name is Bill. Who else is hosting?
I'm Vicky.
You are. You're very happy with yourself. We'll talk about that shortly, because we know you're not going to keep quiet until we do.
I'm
Miss
fine.
Vicky.
I'm fine.
Miss Vicky, we've got a returning guest.
Uh-huh.
He's silly enough to have come on with us. This is time number 3, at least. He apparently is never bored. He was, and probably still is, because you never retire, really. Professional race driver. He started what was Racers 360 and now is called Blaze. Kind of a cool name. I always wondered, should Racers 360 have been Racers 365? Anyway, whatever. Who knows? I don't know. Blaze, fine. And unfortunately for him, he has been subjected to several videos for coaching review of our driving, and his eyes still work, so we didn't burn them out with some of the things we were pulling off. But, you know, he's a tough bird. Welcome back to the podcast, Dion von Moltke.
That is the best intro I've ever had, and I really appreciate that. And looking forward to be back on. I've still got that 2020 vision here, so looking forward to seeing more of those videos, and you guys continue to improve. Although it sounds like Ken's taking that over for me, and he's
a little bit
been a rock solid job so far there.
Yeah, he hasn't laughed at us too loud. It was fun. He edited that part out, so it's always good. The best part
we'll take care of that here.
Yeah, exactly. The best part about the video is when I'm done, I feel like I got better. And then when I go to the track the next time, I did get better. Who knew?
It's amazing how that works, right?
It is. It is. It is. Well, Dion, just in case people have not listened to the prior 2 episodes, which is, their loss, obviously. I mean,
Totally.
How do they survive? These people, they're not doing their homework. Just broad familiarity, background on yourself, what you've been up to, and how we ended up with Blaze.
Well, do they even deserve to hear that if they didn't listen to the last
We're givers,
2? I get it. No, totally joking. So, I guess my background was, grew up racing and karting and went up the ranks and was fortunate enough to have a 10-year professional career in IMSA WeatherTech, drove for Audi Sport and won the Rolex 24-hour, won the Sebring 12-hour twice. And after my time with Audi was done, I decided to take a step back away from professional racing, and that's where I was figuring out, what do I do next with my life? And, through my stint at Audi, they brought me out to a lot of grassroots racing events, Audi Club events, and different DE organizations. And that's where I started to realize what I thought was an issue in education and amateur racing. I kind of noticed that what I would coach would be like the literal opposite of what your local instructor or YouTube guru or might coach. So I said, hey, why don't we solve this? Let's make good coaching more accessible, more convenient, more affordable. Formed Racers 360. Little did we know that the problems we were solving in motorsports don't just exist in motorsports with access to coaching. It exists across the sports ecosystem, and it exists way beyond even sports, right? So we made the hard decision to change the company name Racers 360 to Blaze as we started to scale our form of personalized, asynchronous professional coaching into sports like soccer and now field hockey, and we're slowly kind of expanding beyond car racing. And we also did karting now, and we're doing motorcycle racing. But car racing still are by far our largest market. It's my personal passion because it's my background, and it's still our biggest focus area. So hopefully that all makes sense.
Does. Yeah. You might have lost a few people on asynchronous, but that's okay. There's no quiz on our vocabulary.
Exactly. Just means you don't have to schedule something. You don't have to talk to somebody live. You just send it in, you sit back and relax, you have a beer, and then boom, you get something back that has all of the answers to the test, all the answers to how to go faster. That sounds like the perfect dream to me.
I know. I see a lot of seminars that I sign up for, and it's always like, if they don't do the recording after,
Oh gosh.
I can't do it because
No.
it's just like I have no idea what my schedule is going to be 24 hours before, never mind 3 weeks before. So,
And then these like hour-long conversations too. Like I don't know
Mhm.
about you. Like we talk to a lot of people, and they're always like, in the soccer world, it's like, my kid's young. They don't have like a really long attention span.
Mhm.
And I'm like, who has a long attention span? We work with plenty 70, 75-year-old race car drivers. They have the same attention span as the 12-year-old. It's like a 10-minute video. It's all I got, and that's me. That's everybody I know. So nice, short, sweet, and to the point.
Luckily, we've progressed to the point where our laps take less than 10 minutes, so we can listen to the whole thing. So it's all
exactly. There we go.
Do you have a race philosophy that when you're doing all this? I mean, what are you telling yourself? What are you telling your students?
Mm-hmm.
Something that you keep revisiting. Words to live by.
Yeah. Gosh, there's probably like 75 different ways that I could take that.
That's why we ask you every time.
Exactly. I got something new every time.
Exactly.
Honestly, I think there's been two core things that I've been working on with a lot of my clients, and I'm actually right now in the middle of writing a book about all of this. And I just was writing it this morning, and there was this whole section on it. And essentially, it comes down to two major themes. One is working the corner backwards. A lot of times when we think about corners or we think about adding speed, we think about braking later, rolling more entry speed, yada, yada, yada. But, really what I do this subconsciously in my own driving. That before I really kind of sat down and started working with other coaches and having the conversation, we started putting this pen to paper and realizing this is what professional drivers do. But, when we start to build speed, we focus first on corner exits. We figure out, okay, where do I want my minimum speed, which is a really big reference point that's not talked about anywhere, which is probably the most important reference point in any corner, which is where do you want your minimum speed to come? And then from there, I think about where do I want my full throttle application point to come? And I figure out, okay, those are the 2 points. I don't care about entry speed right now. Let me figure out those 2 points. Once I've got that, that's phase 1. Phase 2 is then starting to build in more entry speed. And I don't do that by braking later. I do that by coming off the brakes. We don't, like newsflash, we don't always have to be on the brakes or the throttle. There's this beautiful thing called coasting that we do all of the time that I highly recommend.
You're
so
never
I get
gonna
off.
make it on YouTube.
Never gonna make it on YouTube. Right? way too nerdy here.
Way too. I mean, that's just totally opposite. You're supposed to buy a used supercar and brake as late as possible, as hard as possible, every time.
And always in a straight line. And get the thing rotate, right?
Always.
Yeah, exactly. So
why would you do anything else?
I mean, just for the sake of argument, playing devil's advocate here, maybe the person on YouTube doesn't know everything, but you never really know. So, you start to roll in more entry speed until one of those other 2 parts that you figured out, like where you want your minimum speed to come, where that full throttle comes. Once you start screwing up one of those 2 things, you now know, hey, I'm over the limit a little bit. Then I bring down my entry speed, and then I work up my break point from there. So you have this 3-phased approach that starts on corner exit, which limits the noise and actually makes it safer for you to find the limit, because it's a lot safer to go to the limit of the car on corner exit than it is on corner entry. So you root it on those 2 things. So that's kind of something we've been talking a lot about, and that's obviously a 1.5 minute super abbreviated version of that.
You just took out Vicky's first question once we get past the intro. It's all right. We've got a few here. We've got a few here. It's okay.
Yeah, totally.
So you're saying, I'm just trying to put this into small words. You're saying that a professional driver who's also a professional coach might know more than the random YouTube guy with 43 views.
Well, it depends on what.
Maybe.
There's many subjects I know nothing about,
Uh-huh.
right? For example, taking the engine in and out of the car. You think I would know something? I know nothing. In fact, we got some great images of my wife wrenching on her car, and I'm there just like holding the radiator when she's underneath wrenching on the thing. So there's some subjects I know absolutely nothing about, but when it comes to maybe figuring out how to drive a car quickly around a racetrack, I pride myself on having some knowledge there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I pride myself on holding the radiator for Vicky as well. So
exactly, we'll raise a glass to that.
Exactly. I think we've both outkicked our coverage there, sir.
Exactly.
All right, so let's do some racing talk now. But not that your first answer wasn't racing talk, actually, now thinking about it, but whatever. So you deal with a lot of different levels of racing driver. You deal with could be their first time on the track, could be, they're going for some international championship that weekend, and everything in between. So if you were to look at it, what would you think is a couple of the things that separates the good, in quote, race driver from somebody who's, the grassroots person who's just trying to get in there and, wants to do their best laps, but has a life outside of racing?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. The more that I start to study this sport and understand this sport, and the more that I've got experience with kind of more beginner level grassroots racers, on the broad spectrum there, everyone from competing from runoffs to the first day on track at a track day. I think a lot of it, there's two parts to the answer here. So as an athlete, we're all athletes, race car drivers. I don't care if you just do track day stuff or if you're competing for the Daytona 24-hour or Formula One, you're still an athlete in this sport. You have knowledge-based goals and you have execution-based goals. Right? So I think the first part, the knowledge-based goals, is actually one of the bigger areas of separation. For example, when we started the company Blaze Racers 360, I way overestimated the typical knowledge of basic fundamentals that grassroots racers have, because we all go to instructors, in DE clinics or racing schools. So I had anticipated that they would have, like, drivers have a pretty good knowledge relative to me, but there's this big loopholes in the education system. We jump way too far forward in some things. So I would say the first part of this is professional race car drivers know what to focus on. Our sport is extremely counterintuitive to go fast, and there's just so much noise. There's so many things you could be focused on going fast, right? The environment, reference points, throttle application, brake pressure, brake release, turn in point, turn in rate. There's so many things. There's information overload. How do you distill down to what matters and simplify this to make it really easy? That, to me, is number one. A simple example of this, I have a lot of my drivers do. You might have done this a little bit with Ken, is I get drivers to just take out a track map, and I want you to simply label every corner as an entry speed corner, an exit speed corner, or a balance corner. Really simple. We always talk about, oh, that's an exit speed corner, or that's an entry speed corner. But it's been really surprising to me on how difficult that exercise is. And it's like the most simple thing. Before I even turn a lap, I roughly know, I know for sure what my priority is in the corner. I can pretty much figure out all of the important reference points, my minimum speed in the corner, where it should come, where I want to get back to full throttle, all of this type of stuff from lap one. So that's the first part of this. The second part of this, on the execution side, it does vary a lot driver to driver. So, like, some drivers have just a lot of quick amateur drivers are quick because they're very high in confidence to just throw the car around, but their technique lacks. And there's other drivers that don't have the confidence, but their rough technique is actually really good. So there's quite a wide variance there. But if I had to choose one thing, I would say it's probably for the slightly more advanced grassroots racer, it's the finesse on the inputs, the ability to brake light. Like, when I'm driving the same car as someone else into light braking corners, it's an area of separation that I've seen where my ability to brake light, and they're trying to brake light, but they have double the pressure. My ability to slow my hands down, to slow things down at the limit and not thrash, that's probably the biggest separation from like intermediate to advanced grassroots racers to the pros.
So the more we get into racing, as when we first talked and really when we first started, we knew nothing. And now we know slightly more than nothing, and we're still going. So we're getting there.
And me both.
Exactly. It's like every time I dig into a topic, I'm like, okay, I know it. And then I dig into it a little more. I'm like, oh, I don't know any of it. It's bottomless. Not wrong. So it seems like the really good drivers are really good at the fundamentals. Just they're better at it, and they just don't mess them up. And we do, honestly, I think everybody does. Even they do. They just figure it out better. But is there a couple things that even the superstar drivers, there's just certain things that you're going to have to work on to be good at racing forever? Like, don't ever stop doing A and B or whatever. Could be 20 things.
Totally. Let me just tackle that first part really quick about fundamentals, because I absolutely love that. I can't tell you how many times I've been working with the driver for a year or two, and they're starting to progress, and then they come to me and starting the new season. Okay, Dion, like, I've got a good grasp of what we're working on. I'm ready to move on to the next thing. Like, what's the new thing we're working on? And I'm like, no, that doesn't exist here. Like,
No,
even
you just don't tell them the secret, Dion. I know what you're doing.
the secret little applesauce on the
That's
side.
right.
No,
It's only pro drivers know this one.
I mean, we're at our level, we're working on the exact same things that I'm coaching. It's just the margin for error, the margins of like the specificity, if I can talk tonight, of what we're trying to do, right? is just narrowed. So we have our sport has fundamentals. If you go and Google it, Google won't tell you anything. But if you type in like soccer fundamentals, you'll see a whole bunch. So it's kind of a weird thing. So we've been kind of trying to build this and introduce this as Blaze, which is our 4 or 5 fundamentals of our sport. They're all looped. As one progresses, the others start to lag. So you have to bring up the others, and you kind of just step your way up, improving one fundamental at a time. And I'm doing that with pro drivers and amateur drivers the same. So the second question, now that I'm done with my tangent on that, was, what's one thing pro drivers continue to work on forever? Am I right on that?
Yeah. You just admit it. You're going to have to work on this for the rest of your racing.
Yeah. I would say there's 2 things that come to mind. I mean, again, there's probably 75 different things, but one is just your mentality. The mental side of racing is just so difficult, and learning how to deal with that, learning how to control it, learning how to stay in the zone, staying in that kind of frame of mind is a really big one.
That's
number
hard.
2, I mean, that is the hardest part of our sport.
Focus is hard.
The more that you really build in your reference points as a driver, the more that you're going to stay focused. So when you lose focus, it's typically because you've lost reference points. So just as a little bonus to you, really difficult to keep focused. We all deal with it. And I would say, I come back to my reference points if I'm losing my focus, or I'm kind of scanning my brain. You can have this like mental chatter where like you're telling yourself you're an idiot for an hour, but you don't even realize you're telling yourself you're an idiot for an hour. So like the more that you can be aware of that, the better. So the mental side's a big one. Adapting to different grip levels, car types, things like that's a really big one. And then the third one's your vision. You especially as you get older, your vision can start to I don't know, lag's not the right word, but it does get affected. And it's not necessarily vision as in like, hey, I've got contacts and I've got 20/20 vision. But one of the things that's probably the most important thing, one of the most important things in all sports, but is especially critical in car racing, is your ability to change focal points, which essentially means, hey, I'm staring, like there's an exercise that looks really dumb, but like you have your thumb in front of you and then you pick something in the distance that you can focus on, and being able to shift your focus from your thumb to something off in the distance. And when you shift and look to one of those, when you first shift your vision, the thing that you shift to can be a little blurry for just that few tenths of a second, and then you shift back. The ability to shift vision quickly is a big thing in car racing, where you're shifting from reference point to reference point to reference point. You need to focus quickly. So those are the 3 things that I would say come to mind.
Oh, okay.
All right, Dion. We're a tough podcast. We're not letting you go, Dion. What's the things that the pros do that we don't do? What are you holding back, man?
They
do it better. Just say
just
it.
Do it better.
They just do it better.
Don't suck so much.
I mean, I've had plenty of teammates where I've like, dude, how are you doing that? And they're like, why can't you do that? Like,
right?
What you do? Like, gosh. But I would say they know what to study. So, for example, when I'm going to go study a racetrack, I, like anyone, will go to YouTube to start and say, okay, what videos are out there? Let me get a track map. Let me get find a video. I'm pretty good at knowing, hey, this driver doesn't know what they're doing. Let me not study that person. Let me go and find the good people. That takes a little bit of time to be able to do. But number 2, when I'm looking at a racetrack, I'm not just sitting there watching somebody drive around. I'm looking, okay, how hard are they manipulating the brakes? Where are they turning? What are the reference points they're using? What's the goal in this corner? Am I trying to get, where my minimum speed should be here? I'm studying it. So when I show up to the racetrack, I know exactly what I'm trying to execute on. I don't know 100% when I, show up for the first lap on a racetrack, like everything. There's some nuanced differences, but, I've got a good idea. And in fact, I'm writing this section today, and recently I went to a new track to me called the Podium Club, which is out in Arizona. Fun little place. And I was driving, again, a new to me Lamborghini GT3 car, one of the new variations. And it's been a year since I've driven this. So it's like, let me figure this thing out. And I pulled out, I just did a 17-minute stint in it. And what I did was I took my video from this hairpin turn 1, and I took lap 2, so my first flying lap, and I took lap 8 or 9, my fast lap, and I just put them side by side. And what I looked for was in the vital points of the corner, where I got back to full throttle, where I got my minimum speed, my turn-in point and my brake point, what were the differences? And, of course, I'm braking a lot deeper in the fast lap. I'm getting back to full throttle a little bit earlier. My speeds are all up. But what was really interesting is the point where my minimum speed came, I was within like a foot from lap 2, right?
Oh.
So yes, I was slower, but I can just go out on a racetrack and know roughly where to place, where I want this thing from lap 1, because I know what I'm studying. I know what I'm looking for. And I think that's probably one of the biggest separations.
Yeah. Like I've noticed that the really good drivers, they can get into a new car at a track, and it doesn't take them very long.
Yeah,
to get to their,
there's no such thing as like a home track advantage at the pro level. Like, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So, what is the top priority of a corner and how to determine it?
Ooh, I love that. It leads exactly into what we're talking about here. So every corner, and this is, wow, it's like you guys planned this.
We might have a future in this podcast then.
So, we've all heard of entry speed corners or exit speed corners, right? Like, that's a pretty familiar term. If you just like opened up a whiteboard and you just like drew a corner on the whiteboard, I would be able to tell you this made up corner, if it's an entry speed corner, an exit speed corner, or balance speed corner. Balance is like it's like equally, the two are the same. And I know that because I know how do I prioritize the right thing here. So in every corner, there's going to be a priority, whether it's getting back to full throttle and maximizing my straightaway, maximizing my exit, or if it's entry speed corner, it's trying to bring in as much speed as possible, and you focus more on the deceleration zone, right? That braking zone. So let's just play a little game here, right? Or kind of, what was the track that you guys both drove most recently?
Most recently, Lightning.
New Jersey.
New Jersey Lightning.
New Jersey Lightning. Okay. So using that, you have, like, for example, the final corner, right? That long right.
The bowl.
Is that what we call it? The bowl. Okay. Yeah. So I've only ever driven a Thunderbolt. So, but I still know Lightning really well here. So what makes Lightning so interesting is it's not a traditional double apex corner, but you can kind of double apex the thing a little bit, right? So we're actually kind of just jumping up to like a college level class here, right?
That's okay. I got my belts on. I'm good.
There we go.
Nah.
So, each apex and Lightning has a different priority, and this is true for double apex corners. So, I know we don't traditionally double apex, like, just roll with me on the double apex thing. It's not a traditional one, but it's kind of like that way. So the first apex on Lightning is 1,000% an entry speed corner. Why? Because if I let's say slow down more to accelerate out of the corner in the first apex, there's not a long acceleration before I need to decel again for that second apex, right? Like, I need to make that second apex, right? So if you have two drivers, one, let's say, I'm going to make up the numbers here, rolls in 10 miles an hour more, but is 3 car lengths later back to a throttle. The other driver slows it down more and gets back to throttle. By the time they're decelerating for the next corner, if you think about like speed graphs, so like the first driver rolled in 10 miles an hour more, was later back to throttle, so they've got a worse exit. The other driver's getting a better exit, but there's not enough time on exit to make up for how much time they lost on corner entry, right? Because it's just like you're turning to the second apex so soon.
Right.
But now the second apex in Lightning, which leads onto the long front straightaway, is the exact opposite. So let's say that in the same scenario, driver A drives 10 miles an hour more in entry speed, but is way late back to full throttle. The other driver slows it down a little bit more and accelerates out. Now you're going to have the opposite, where if you look at the speed graph, one driver gains on entry, the other driver gains on exit. But now there's enough time spent at full throttle where the driver that lost a little bit on entry but gets back to full throttle has is faster for the entire straightaway. So essentially, what you're trying to do as a race car driver is maximize the distance of which you are faster. right? So if you're faster than me a little bit on entry, but it's only for 4 car lengths, but then I'm faster than you at an roughly equal amount of change in mile an hour for, let's call it half a mile, I don't really care about you gaining a little bit on me on corner entry, because I'm going to make up that and a lot more on corner exit.
Right.
So let me pause right there. Is that making sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So essentially, in every corner, you're trying to figure out, is my acceleration zone longer than my deceleration zone, or is it vice versa? So in a double apex corner, apex 1, the deceleration zone is longer than the acceleration zone out of that first apex. So I know it's an entry speed corner. Apex 2, the acceleration zone is way longer than the deceleration zone into it. So it's an exit speed corner. Similarly, at lightning here, you have you kind of go through 1. It's like 2, 3, 4, 5 is the over the top of the hill there.
Over the top, yeah.
Okay, so 6 would be an exit speed corner, right? Because the deceleration zone is shorter than the acceleration zone. But then you have like 2, 3, 4, right? Which is is 2? Is it 2, 3, and then 4 is the left-hander, right?
2's right, 3's
I think is right again, and then it goes into the sharp left that leads into 5.
Yeah, there's a sharp left that goes into 5.
Yeah, so like 2, 3 are entry speed corners for the most part, especially 2, because you don't have that long acceleration zone. So then now, okay, hey, we've got a formula figuring out entry versus exit speed corners. Now we can figure out where our ever so important minimum speed in the corner should come. And essentially, in an exit speed corner, you want your minimum speed coming just before the apex so that you can start your positive acceleration at apex, or as you arrive at the apex. In an entry speed corner, I want my minimum speed coming after the apex because I'm trying to maximize my roll speed in. So, this is kind of a little bit of a news flash here. A lot of people think the person that wins the straightaway or is fastest on the straightaway is the first person to throttle, which is one of my biggest beefs. It's complete and utter bullshit, because that doesn't take into context of everything else. So what I love about this formula is, I'm not saying my minimum speed comes at the turn-in point I'm accelerating through. No, it comes just before the apex and those exit speeds. I'm starting my acceleration at apex, getting back to full throttle. So it comes a little bit earlier than entry speed corners, where, entry speed corners like, we can call, just spitballing here, like turn 3 at Road Atlanta, where you're only getting your minimum speed as you land on the other side of the apex curve. That's where my minimum speed comes. So it's after the apex point. So understanding your corner priorities lets you figure out where your minimum speed should come, which then, like I mentioned earlier, is one of the most important parts of this. So I know it's a really complicated concept, but once you see it and visualize it, it's hard to explain without like getting a whiteboard out or a track map. But once you see it and visualize it, it becomes pretty easy.
So that explains one of the turns that we get into the most arguments with is at this year's nationals at pit race. And 5, 6, I always try to explain to people, especially if you're in a low horsepower car, you want to be on the gas flat before you even get to the apex of 6. I mean, as early as possible, because otherwise you just get chewed up on that hill.
So I thought it was just 5 up the hill. Is it 5?
There's 5, 6. They call them, it's 2 pieces. I don't know. It's basically one big turn.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's sort of like as you arrive down to that apex in 5, as you get to that apex, I'm starting to crack into throttle, and I need to be flat. Not many car lengths after that. And so building on that, talk about pit race. Turn 7 at pit race is one of the most consistently incorrectly driven corners, is lack of a better word. If you think about turn 7, how long is that deceleration zone? How long is the acceleration zone until you reach turn 8, right? Like super short. So a lot of drivers use turn 7, they brake, they arrive at the apex. Just before they hit the apex, they're on the throttle, and then they kind of like sacrifice speed for turn 8, which makes no sense at all. For me, I'm rolling in turn 7, and I'm trying to bring in so much speed that I don't get back to throttle until I'm a car length and a half after the apex point.
After the curbs on the right there.
Yeah, exactly. Pit race is a fun one. I'm super pumped about champs going there this year.
It should be fun. We'll be watching.
Me too.
Yeah. So, what do you think about field reference versus visual reference, or both?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the more references you have, the better you're at, right? Because using references is what keeps you focused. And So the important thing about visual references is what science is really starting to show. They've done a bunch of studies lately that have been super fascinating, is your focus, your ability to focus directly ties in with your eyes and where your eyes are looking. They actually, in that study, found that blind people have a harder time focusing than people with sight, which kind of backs this up a little bit. So when you are getting lost in a corner or when you're losing mental focus, it's almost always down to a lack of one of your reference points, one of your visual reference points on a racetrack, and every corner has 5. And as a race car driver, if you hear, after the race, someone wins the race and they're like, how did you deal with that pressure on the last lap? And of course, everyone's like, I just hit my spots, right?
That's what I do.
Yeah. Exactly. You just hit your spots. That's all you got to do as a race car driver. It's pretty damn easy.
It's easy. I don't know why you people complain so much.
Exactly. And all they're doing is they know where to look. They know their reference points, and they're just going from one reference point to the next. And so you've got good reference points. It's really important. We always talk about eyes up in our sport, but eye timing on reference points is a big thing. So it's not just knowing where to look, it's knowing how long to look at that and when to shift to the next visual reference point. So that's all really important. But there's also feel references as well. And a feel reference can be things like, one of the feel reference points for me is how much brake pressure can I have at the turning point or just past the turning point. I'm feeling what the car is doing here. And that's dictating to me on how late I can brake. Typically, the limiting factors of how late you can brake is how much brake pressure you can have past the turning point. Feel reference can be things like, the balance of the car as you come off the brake, your end of brake, what's the rotation, what's the angle of the car. Even a feel reference can be, man, I freaking nailed the exit that lap. Like, I know what it felt like. How do I get that again? So it's looped in together. You can't, if you have just feel references without any visual references, you're screwed, or vice versa. You need both working together. And that's, hopefully that sort of makes sense overall.
It does. It does.
It does, but I'm not sure about Miss Vicky, but I suck at references.
Why do you think that is?
Well, there's a couple turns where I just don't know what to look at. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on, and usually we're driving with lots of cars. 100 plus cars. So the odds of me ever getting to the same spot is low. So I have lots of laps where I just have to kind of make do with what I got. And I think it trained me poorly to use references. And I don't think I've ever gotten really good at it. Like, the only feel reference, when you said feel reference, the only thing that came to mind was the last turn on Mid-Ohio. If I hit that little depression, I know I got it right. If I miss it, I know I didn't, and I just blew it out. But otherwise, feel references don't really have any. And then a lot of turns, unless I know I suck at them, I don't have, like, if you were to say, Bill, what's your reference for blah 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 turn, I'd be like, I don't know, turn. When it feels right.
So I mean, the reason why you might suck in a corner, I'm not saying you do, is probably because you don't have the reference points. They're probably the most important thing. And yes, it is freaking difficult when you're on track with 100 cars and you're just trying to be like, where does this track even go? Why are you guys all passing me? Like, can I just get a lap to myself? So, like, I know how hard that is. I think there's a lot of misconceptions on what a reference point is and how to use reference points. A reference point, where most people think about, is like, some of the famous ones I hear about are, there's like at Laguna Seca in the corkscrew, everyone talks about some tree.
The second tree. I'm like,
second tree. I don't know. Road Atlanta turn 2. They talk about some tree or light pole or something. So
it's a church at Gingerman.
Oh, I didn't. That's a new one to me.
10A, the last turn, there's some church. You're supposed to look at the light pole by the church. I'm like, I don't look that far away. I'm looking at the street, man.
Exactly. So, that works for some drivers. I personally am the most oblivious race car driver there is to that type of stuff. I remember going to Barber, and they have that big museum on the exit of one of the right-handers, and people kept talking about this building next to the racetrack and how big it was and how they're using that as a reference. And I was like, what building are you guys talking about? And they're like, dude, like, this one right here. And I was like, oh shit, there's an 8-story building right here. I didn't even know that. So, reference points, also people talk about it like the 500 board, 400 board, 300 board, right? And they're going to say, hey, I brake at the 500 board. Reference points can be freaking anything as long as that thing doesn't move. Like, don't use a shadow. Like, that's not a reference point. But, my reference point for the brake zone in turn 10 at Sebring is there's like this like black tarry patch in the road, and I use that to judge my braking zone. Doesn't mean I brake there. It means, hey, I'm using that to reference. So I think the first thing is the more experience you're going to gain, the more that you drive in certain corners and laps, you're going to find more references for that, right? Because when you're overtaking cars, if you're using the 500 board, you may not see the 500 board,
Right.
but you can start to use things like the start of the curb. There's an access road on my left-hand side. There's this black dot. There's all of these other things there that I can be looking for, right? So that's an experience thing you'll gain. The second part is depth perception can be a reference point. There's plenty of corners where, I was coaching someone at Chuckwalla at a session on Blaze today, and there's no reference points there. It is a mostly flat, deserty thing. You have to use depth perception in those cases. So you've got depth perception as a visual reference point. That's a hard one. That takes a lot more time. But looking at other videos, looking at what other people are using, even on the clean laps, looking for, obviously I'm not sitting here looking for reference point, but I'm registering them. I'm visualizing and thinking about them. That's a big one. But when you've got that much traffic, it's hard. That's why I think being able to just do a lapping day people way overestimate the importance of getting clean laps and reps and longer stints for lapping days. So in traffic, really difficult because how many times do you let's talk about pit race. And when you have 100 cars on track, how many reps of turn 5 by yourself just driving it do you think you get in a race?
2-hour stint, I'll probably get 4.
So imagine me asking you to do anything and improve in 4 reps. It just isn't realistic, right? I think we always forget about that part of our sport. Is today you need reps, you need clean laps to practice and experiment and learn. So trying to find, maybe it's not, obviously there's a financial component to all of this. I don't want to minimize that, but if you're planning your year in advance, maybe optimizing for a few more opportunities to go do some open lapping, preferably not a 15-20 minute session, preferably more like a 40-45 minute session where you can really get into a rhythm. I think that's a great advantage for a lot of drivers that they're not taking advantage of in grassroots racing.
We typically make our schedule so that we have at least one HPDE between every race. And ideal, if we're really trying to get better, like this year is try not to suck so bad. So we're doing 2. So we'll have race 2, and awesome. That seems to work for us. We had one season where we didn't have any races. We had one race the entire year, and the rest of it was HPDs, and I think everybody got the best they could. So I think we've got data to support your
there's no brainer there. And the great thing here is all of what I've learned about reference points and all this, I've learned from Ken, and I'm referencing Ken Hill as a coach on Blaze. Who Bill, I think you're the one. He's kind of your coach on our system here, and he is the expert when it comes to coaching reference points. I learned from him. It was something as a pro driver I instinctually did, but I never knew what I was doing. So I've learned a lot from him on that. So I think he is more of an expert here than I am on how to build this. So I'd definitely reach out to him as well, because I think this is a key point of your driving,
especially if you only have 2 wheels.
Yes, especially if you only have 2 wheels. I don't know how those people do those. I would never do that.
No, I would like it way too much and die way too early. So,
So how to most quickly learn a track? What would you recommend?
Captain's log supplemental.
Miss Vicky.
Yes, sir.
You know what?
What?
I've been thinking about this Sentinel system.
Yeah. Tell me about the Sentinel system.
So what I was thinking was we have the one car that's got the aim dash that's slowing us down. Because installing the aim dash is actually, it probably is easy, but it's quite hard the first time. We haven't figured that out yet. The Sentinel system is really easy to set up. So what I was thinking was, why don't we put it in the Lemons car? And we'll worry about the aim data information separately, and we'll kind of break it down into a project, because then we'd have the motorsports video system that we really, really want, and we'd be able to stream it. We just won't have the data inside, but we have the data outside, so we can combine them later. But I think that's a really good solution.
So what does this Sentinel system do?
Well, if it had the aim data, it would have all the data on the screen, and you could see all their telemetry and everything live. But we'd be able to not only record it for viewing after the race, but we could actually watch our car during the race.
Ooh, like on the monitor and everything?
On a monitor. If you were at home and I was at a track, or if you were at the track and I was at home, depends on who gets the little short straw, but we'd be able to watch each other.
It's something I've always wanted to do.
And you know what? If you're driving, you know what you can do on the Sentinel system?
What's that?
You can communicate to me with your hands, and I can't do a thing about it.
Even better.
So, if you need to give a wave or a Jersey wave, whatever you need, we could save it and see it on the screen. And then you can have up to 3 different cameras, and it'll have picture in picture. You'll have the basic main shot out the front window, and then 2 cameras where you put them wherever you want. One could be on the driver, or one could be on the rear view. It's kind of cool.
Then we can upload it onto YouTube.
We could bore millions of people on YouTube.
I love it.
All right. Very well. You know what the only downside I see about this?
But
Your mom and my mom are going to be panic stricken the entire weekend watching this thing to see if everything's going well.
this is true.
We probably shouldn't tell them.
I like the idea of having a Sentinel.
Well, luckily we have maybe 2. Depends on how things go. We're going to try. All right. That sounds like a plan. That's the project. We got to get that ready for the next race.
Sounds great.
All right. Very well. Thank you, ma'am.
Work it backwards. So my process for learning the track is I start with a track map. I can identify on the track map, what are my priorities in these corners, for the most part, with about 95% accuracy, unless there's some like weird undulation in the road or something like that you can't tell from a track map, obviously. So I figure out, okay, where's this track going? What are my priorities in every corner? I then going to roughly figure out what are the 2 or 3 corners that matter most on this racetrack. Really the corners that lead onto the longest straightaway. So like just throwing out the Coda, right? Coda's 20 turns. It's hard to show up and know 20 turns off the bat, right? So I look at the racetrack. I'll know what my priority is roughly in all the racetrack, but I'm going to be hyper focused on turn 11 and turn 20 because those are the 2 most important corners on that racetrack because they lead onto the longest 2 straightaways, right?
Right.
Once I've done that, okay, it's time to go study some onboard video. I'm not going to iRacing or anything like that. I'm going to YouTube. I'm finding a good driver. I care a little bit less about what car they're driving. Sure, if I can find a good driver in a car close to mine, great. Maybe I don't go look at Lewis Hamilton in the Formula One car because those things are just so different, rocket ships, but like something somewhat close to me, it will work. I'm going to study that video, and I don't care about, I see so many people that are taking notes on like their minimum speed in turn 11 is 42 miles an hour and they're using 3rd gear. No, I'm not looking. I don't care really what gear I'm in. I don't care what mile an hour it is. I'm looking for what are the reference points they're using? Roughly where are they braking? How much brake pressure are they using? Where is their minimum speed in the corner coming? Where are they getting back to full throttle? Where's their car placement? Why are they placing the car there? Those are the things I care about. Gearing and speed and all that will take care of itself. Focus on that. Finally, once I've done all of that, if the track's on iRacing, I might go do a little bit there. Don't overdo it. Sim racing can form a ton of bad habits if you use it incorrectly. It's a good tool if it's used correctly, but I've seen evidence that not a lot of people can use it correctly. So I'm a little bit more critical a lot on sims than a lot of driver coaches are probably.
I could see that.
How about learning a new car?
That one's hard. That one, I don't know if I have a great process for that, to be honest. So like I was just recently 2 weeks ago, out there in that new GT3 car, figuring that out. If there's the new GT3 cars, we have ABS and TC, right? I would just first few laps, let me just turn those all the way up. Like, well, I don't need to be a rah and I don't need driver aids. No, that's all bullshit. I'm going to use them, right? If you have something to make my life easy, let me do it, especially the first few laps. And I guess the way that I learn a new car is would be this process. Obviously the race car has grip, right? And we have sort of 2 different grip levels. We have longitudinal grip, acceleration and braking, and you have lateral grip, turning, right? And we're trying to figure out how much grip a car has. The last place that I want to experiment with that is in the middle of like a high speed corner, right? High risk, low margin for error. So the way that I would start getting a feel for how much grip I've got is I'm going to pick a corner with the lowest risk and the biggest brake zone. Hopefully those 2 are the same. So the most amount of runoff room, because I'm going to make a mistake here. And I'm going to brake really conservatively, but I'm going to hit the hell out of the brakes. I'm going to attack those brakes. I'm going to hit them harder and harder and harder lap after lap until I start to get into the ABS or I start to lock up a tire early in the brake zone. And what I'm doing here is I'm getting a feel for how much grip the car has, because race cars, this is not 1,000% accurate, but it's within reason, roughly true. How much grip I've got longitudinally, braking and accelerating, is going to be roughly the same as how much grip the car has laterally, right? So if I can brake with 2 Gs of force, I can probably pull 2 Gs in the corner. Roughly true. And our bodies are pretty good at feeling how much braking grip you've got and then translating that to turning grip. And no, I'm not looking at a dash and saying, okay, I've got 1.8 Gs here at brake zone, so let me pull one. No, I'm feeling it, right? So I start backing up my brake zone. I start with hard brakes. I over brake the car. Okay, let me get that figured out. Then what I do is I start to get a feel for how much traction do I have out of corner. So going back to this podium club, I knew where my minimum speed should come. I knew it was an exit speed corner. It was a relatively safe corner. Okay, let me get harder and harder on the brakes. And when I compared my kind of first lap to last lap, my first lap, my speed was lower, and where I got back to full throttle was later. And then I realized, okay, I've got more grip than I realized. I can be more aggressive to full throttle. I'm getting back to full throttle quicker. So I'm start with those 2 sections. The final piece of this is working up to how much grip I've got laterally, how much grip I can have at the turning point. And that's where I kind of, how I learn a car is pretty similar to how I learn a racetrack. I work on getting off the brakes, not trying to brake super deep, coming off the brakes, spending coast time, trying to get a feel for when the car will typically start to understeer, right? I'm not trail braking super deep into it. I start to get a feel for, okay, how much rotation does the car have? How much do I need to accelerate? Trail brake into it. How much do I not need to trail brake? That's going to change my end of brake zone. And then the final step is working up the brakes. So it's sort of a very similar process, minus just getting the longitudinal feel in the brakes first, and then figuring out the second half of accelerations.
Yeah, I did my first arrive and drive last year. My first couple. And the one thing I noticed was changing from a car that I was familiar with to a car I wasn't familiar with was a bigger difference than I had expected, even though one of the cars I got into, I had one of those. It was an E36. I'd driven one before. This one was just very different. I mean, it got down to like little things, like the shift pattern was crooked. And it made it easier to miss shift, and you're driving somebody 100%. Else's car. I don't want to miss shift because I don't want to buy a broken race car. Yeah. And then the other car I drove is a very capable, in our level, very capable car, and its brake application onto the brakes was just vastly different than what I was accustomed to. And I locked up those tires thinking I was still working my way up, and all of a sudden those tires locked up, and I'm like, well, that was unexpected. And
that's why you start conservative, right? You pick the right corner with the right runoff, because you're gonna make a mistake, and then in that situation, oh shit, I'm locking up tires much earlier than I thought. My brain goes, okay, I've got less grip than I thought, so I know I'm going to be back in grip.
It was the pedal. The pedal gave me itself? More.
Got it. That makes sense.
Because the tires, they ran the same tires, and the cars. Yeah. It was just the pedal travel was from like no brake to a lot.
Had a different master cylinder in it or something like that.
Okay, all right. So unexpected.
Changing race cars is like figuring out a new race car is a lot more intimidating than figuring out a new racetrack for the most part. It's always my preference to do one of those at a time. It's always a little bit more intimidating to do both at the same time, but sometimes you don't get a choice. But there's a process to all of this.
Exactly. Okay, so you run a company with coaching as a primary thing, and we've done this a couple times. So now I've come up with a new way of introducing this, because I still can't get people to buy into the coaching. So Dion, here's my question.
Don't open a business in coaching. That would be my coaching advice.
Exactly. So here's my question, Dion, and this is 100% full facetiousness hat, fully engaged.
Love it.
Why should I wait until I've perfected my driving and my car to get a coach?
You do that when you want to spend years undoing all the bad habits that you've just formed. So if you really like undoing bad habits and taking longer to learn how to do something properly, then you absolutely want to say, hey, let me get better before I get a coach. That's the best way to do it.
I'm not good enough yet, Dion.
You're not good enough, and someone like me, I'm gonna be. I can't I can't explain this in simple terms, right? Like I'm going to be talking about all this advanced physics and stuff like that. I don't have the ability to coach someone after their second day on the racetrack, right?
No,
That's
not at all.
always what we hear. And yes, our coaches can coach advanced drivers, but you always heard if you can't coach like a fifth grade, or you can't teach it to a fifth grader, you probably don't know the subject. That kind of applies here, right? So we take a passion in being able to hopefully explain things in somewhat simplified formats. And I promise you, if I can coach a professional driver or coach someone to runoffs, I can help you figure out what to focus on after your first day on the track, after your first year on the track, after your first race on the track. So being in all seriousness, the biggest mistake I see is people wanting to wait to get coaching. And that's, obviously I'm the first person to say, of course, I've got some biasy here, right?
A little bit.
But I'm a little bit, but that's if you're working with us, if you're working with any quality coach, and I really want to call out the quality part, is it's hard to find good quality people. In fact, if anybody is not sure if they're working with quality person, email me personally. My email address is dion@blaze.io. And I'll be happy to say, hey, look, I've heard of this person. I know they do a great job. I don't know who they are. Like, what are they teaching you? You don't need to be a customer of ours. Just email me, because coaching, the more that we all get coached in this industry, the better this industry is going to be. We're going to see less crashes, which means we're going to see more green flag runtime. We're going to spend less people spending money on fixing stuff and more money on driving stuff. So, coaching will fit, like being proactive with that will save you a lot of money, a lot of frustration. And, the big thing we see here is, a lot of drivers are like, well, I know where I'm going slow. I know I'm not rolling enough entry speed. Great. My job isn't really to help you know where to go faster or what to do to go faster. Most people can do that. My job is to let you know of the things we're doing wrong, in which order do we fix them, and how do we fix them? What's the right way of fixing them so that we're lowering risk and actually making improvement versus you beating your head against the wall? Because I've done this for a little bit, in 20 years now, and know how to teach this, know the order and all of that type of stuff. So there's quite a few reasons that, unless you really like undoing bad habits, to not wait to get a coach.
So the point was, everybody's always saying I'm not good enough, or I need to get my turbo installed, or I wait until I get the tires or whatever.
Let me spend $20,000 on the car instead of a few $100 on myself.
Exactly.
Totally. Which I totally, look, don't get me wrong, I totally get that. Like I want a faster car, I want more horsepower, I want more grip. I totally get that.
I know, I get it too. It's just, but they don't understand. And I think the reason I phrased a question like I did was to see if just the statement of the opposite made people realize how dumb it was.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that thinks that. A lot of our coaches sit there and scratch their head. I'm like, if this was any other sport, like, what's the first thing I think about? Is I want to coach. Like, I am a terrible tennis player. I talk about this every once in a while. Like, we go out and play tennis. Literally, the very first thing I thought about was like, okay, how do I find a good coach in my area? Like, who's the right coach? Which, by the way, is a freaking nightmare to do. Like, I live in Austin. I'm like, how do I know who the heck is a good coach here for tennis, let alone driving a race car? But it's literally the first thing I think about. So, car racing, there's this mentality in our sport because we don't see coaches. We see two things. We see, one is instructors, and I love DE instructors. They are the most important person in our sport, but there's a big difference between a coach and an instructor, right? That's kind of the factor here. I don't want that to come across dismissive. Like I said, I think instructors are the most important people in our sport. But we also just see people just doing it, right? And we drive on the streets, and we all know that how different that is, but we think we know how to go fast. And the truth of the matter is, driving a race car fast is extremely counterintuitive. Most people are telling me, I just need to get the throttle sooner. I don't have the confidence, or the car is just understeering. I can't do it. And I'm like, yeah, because you don't need to go to throttle sooner. You need to go to throttle later to get more speed. So it's very counterintuitive. That's just like one thing off the top of my head. So try it. You will be blown away by how easy a coach can make this sport, how much they can simplify the sport, and how much more fun this sport is when you're the rock star, when you're the one going faster versus spending money on parts to go faster, which that's fun too, but it's a lot more fun when you're feeling yourself improve.
If only there was a place we could go, Dion, that is relatively cheap With
like less
good
than
coaches?
$30.
Like what? There's no
Like-
way it could be less than $30.
When's the last time you spent less than $100 on anything on your race car?
I'll let you know.
So this is like our thing here is we're so confident here in you're going to love working with one of our coaches. And by the way, so here at Blaze, I personally curate every coach on our platform. We worked with people like Joseph Newgarden, 2-time IndyCar champion. Ricky Taylor's a coach on our platform, 2-time Rolex at Daytona 24-hour DPI champion. We have Spencer Piggott, an Indy 500 front row qualifier. Oliver Askew just spent a year driving Formula E for Andretti. We have so many high quality people. Ken Hill, who is just a freaking legend on the 2-wheel and 4-wheel side of things. Colin Mullen, who's amazing with data and sim racing, and also does IMSA and SRO as well, and won races there. So all amazing coaches, and it's not just a resume thing. I went to Ricky Taylor. I'm like, okay, bud, you want to coach with us? I know you can drive a race car really well. Here's the customer video. I want you to film a practice coaching session. I'm going to critique you. I'm going to listen to how you communicate. And I'm going to say if you've got the ability to communicate this to be worthy of being a coach on our platform. And he went and did that. Every coach on our platform does that. So high quality coaches, high quality ability to communicate things. That's super convenient. How many, like we all have we GoPros, we film on our phones, we have AIM Smarty cams, we have V-Boxes. We have a simple platform where you just like literally drag and drop that video over. Or I have some customers that are like have the video up on their computer and they just film it on their phones and send it to me. We don't need this fancy video. We don't need fancy data. If you've got it, great, send it. Our coaches will look at it. You'll be able to type in notes, tell us what you're thinking about, what you're feeling, yada, yada, yada. You're going to get back a really in-depth coach sessions you can watch and rewatch. And we're so confident that we're going to have you love the coach you're working with. We're doing right now a $29 30-day trial. You pick your dedicated coach. You get a one-on-one intro call over Zoom with your coach. They're meeting you. They're understanding your goals, what your challenges are, what you're racing, all of that type of stuff. You get a free coaching session in your first month. You get access to chat messaging with your coach. So, for example, I'm working with a couple of people racing that Button Willow this weekend. Literally on this podcast, I just see Ollie sent me a message asking me a little bit to clarify one thing on turn 3 at Button Willow. So I'm going to send the message. I'm going to talk to him. Be with them. Every other Tuesday night, we have live coaching calls. Welcome to join. We have a great resource center of content. You get all of this. It's literally $30. And if you don't love it, you cancel it. No harm, no foul. If you do, you want to continue, then you'll subscribe to one of our annual packages, which, by the way, are still ridiculously cheap. Like right now, our cheapest annual package is $365 for the entire year. So $1 a day. You get another coaching session. You get access to all their calls. You get access to your coach for the year with that price. So we've kind of put it as a no-brainer price because we're so confident on how much you're going to love it. And backing that up here, we did a little over 800 coaching sessions last year between our coaches. On average, drivers went 1.5 seconds a lap faster after one single coaching session. So, we've got results to back this up as well.
Miss Vicky, do you know how fast you went after your coaching session? How much faster?
I went pretty darn fast.
That's what we love.
That's not a number.
We'll take a number.
Remember.
1, 2, 3.
You're the one who
fast,
keeps
5.
track of my data.
If you were to guess,
An extra 10?
No, 10 seconds would be crazy.
We've seen customers. We've seen eight, like a little over 8 seconds has been our most significant one coaching session jump so far. Oh, so close. 7. Oh, that's a mic drop moment right there.
And it was a short track too. It was lightning. Yeah. So there's not a lot there. It's not like Road Atlanta.
It's crazy. And by the way, someone like Vicky able to drop 7 seconds. That's phenomenal. There's some people that are like, well, I'm not 7 seconds off the pace. So we're also helping save tenths, right? And that's where the data comes in and stuff like that. So because this is personalized, it doesn't matter what your experience level is, if you're off your first day on the track day, or if you're competing for the SCCA runoffs. It doesn't matter how long you've been driving. It doesn't matter what you've been driving. It doesn't matter where you're driving. I've worked with people in Dubai and Malaysia and Mexico and Guatemala, and of course, they're all across the United States. We have coaches across now the world that know the tracks intimately. By the way, knowing the racetrack actually doesn't matter. I'll whisper that because a lot of people don't really realize that. But our coaches will be able to help you save lap time and go faster. And we also coach on racecraft. I was doing coaching someone today. He sent me in his entire race. He was racing a Chuck Wall on an E30. And not only were we talking about, okay, how to go faster, which we were talking about reference points, it was also talking about racecraft. How do you position yourself, overtaking, defending, race starts, consistency, all of this type of stuff. And that to me is a lot of fun, is working on racecraft type of stuff. And so we do everything from racecraft to how to go faster, to questions between races, to prepping for races. Your coach is there for you as like your full-time dedicated coach. And you can go probably watch them on TV on Sundays and racing professionally.
And we do.
So we love to hear.
That's right.
Exactly.
So in spite of being able to help people like us, you can help just about everybody from entry level to really good.
Man, I haven't done this yet, but I'm getting ready to do this. I know my own driving. I guarantee you Ken Hill, Ricky Taylor, Colin will be able to help me. And they're, if Ricky and I went on track together, we're going to be pretty close together on terms of lap time. But that doesn't mean there's not things we each other see. So I'm planning to create a little bit of I don't tell anybody yet, but I'm going to create a fake account. I'm going to send in my video and data to maybe someone like a Ken or a Ricky or something like that to see what they come back with. Because I guarantee you they're going to come back with some guidance and coaching points and stuff like that.
Okay. So if you want to do that on our account, they won't believe you.
Oh no.
Ken will be like, Bill, are you ready to coach me now?
No, I think we got a long way to go before Ken ever utters anything close to that. So that's fun though. So, everybody wants to do this by themselves. Do you give like a tip or two for what somebody should look at if they're looking at their own video or looking at their own data? Like,
I love that. So if we're looking at video, the main tip I would say, and this doesn't apply to everybody, this applies to the majority of people, look at where your initial throttle application comes. So if you have a GoPro, you're going to have to listen, you're going to play the video and pause it where you hear throttle. And if your hands are not starting to unwind, you're probably applying the throttle in the wrong spot. So focus in on where you get the throttle. If I'm looking at data, I would say two things. Again, there's always exceptions to the rules. So, keyboard warriors out there, and I'm not saying this is always true, but it's true 95% of the time, is if you're looking at your data and you look at your throttle graph, look at your brake graph. If you don't have a brake graph, look at your long G graph. If you don't have a throttle graph, you can't really do this on long G. But if you have a throttle graph, if you start to see your throttle application going up, and if you as you start to build throttle, you never want to release off of it. So if you see your throttle graph going up and to the right, and as it's going up and to the right, it starts to dip back down and then come back up again, something's wrong. You probably made a mistake. The second part is the
slope is different, right?
We want to expand on that a little bit?
Like if the throttle starts going like this, like granted you accelerate slower with the higher gears. If your throttle is very vertical and then it starts to generally lessen, like
flatten out almost. That's true. There are some like higher speed corners where maybe you want to be a little bit more progressive, but yeah, I think that's true. It's like you want more of an exponential looking curve than a log looking
like
curve.
A rollover.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a log curve. And then the brake release is sort of the inverse to that. And again, there's exceptions to the rules, but once you start your brake release on pressure, you never want to have to add brake pressure back in. So if you're if your peak brake pressure comes at the turn-in point, probably something wrong. If you start to release off the brakes and add brake pressure back to it and then have that release, probably something wrong. Those are the two things I would look on data.
So
I never looked at either one of those. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what you just send that to your coach. We'll do the work for you.
I should.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What's crabbing?
Crabbing. So it's the act of dancing before you get into the car like a crab.
Nope.
No, I'm just kidding.
Stop it.
This is what I used to do.
I'm sitting here going,
Dion.
I'm just kidding.
It's a pre ritual,
It's a free ritual that Lewis Hamilton does it every time. No, I'm just kidding. Right. The latest TikTok dance. Crabbing is where, as a race car driver, you want to theoretically be, as you turn into a corner, you want to be all the way out wide and turn in from the widest part of the racetrack to apex and go out because you're trying to, make your radius of the corner bigger, right? If you turned in from the inside of the racetrack, that corner is a lot tighter, right? So the tighter the corner, the slower you have to go. So crabbing is where you start your brake application and you're all the way to the outside of the racetrack. And as you progress through the brake zone, you slowly start moving towards the middle of the racetrack. You're not turning in yet. It's just the car starts like walking away from the outside of the racetrack. So by the time you turn in, you're no longer all the way to the outside of the racetrack. And crabbing is like an accident. We don't mean to do that. We don't want to do that. It just kind of naturally happens. So that's what crabbing is where we turn in from the middle of the racetrack, but we started our brake zone all the way wide. It's just like the car kind of walked its way away from the outside of the racetrack before turning in.
Right.
Think of you the first couple of times you went into China Beach at Mid Ohio.
Yeah.
Like,
it's definitely a very it's one of those like it's just a normal thing to do, right? It's especially when you all have those tricky reference points. It's easy to be not looking at the right place, and that's where that happens.
Got it.
Okay, Dion, it's time to hit you with the hard ones. So
what have we been doing in the last hour?
You know what we were doing, Dion? We were going through most of these are things that you put out on your weekly emails. So even if you don't do Blaze, you should get the emails.
Oh yeah, I always forget to talk about those. But yeah, every Monday I write out a coaching point. If you've liked anything that you've heard today, those are the kind of the emails. If you think I'm a complete idiot, maybe you won't like these emails. But we just go to our website, like blaze.io/car racing. Somewhere on that, we've got a little form. I think it's near the bottom. You just type in your email address. They're totally free. We give you an article, a video, and a coaching point. They're totally free every Monday. And I hear they're decent.
They are. And usually you lie and you give us two.
Sometimes there's a little
almost
bonus point in there, right? It's if I had some inspiration earlier that week from a coaching video I was doing.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'll send you some more videos and you'll be like, wow, I didn't know somebody could do it wrong that way.
Oh.
All right. So let's pretend that we're going into a high-speed corner, long straightaway into a turn, maybe a 90-degree turn-ish. What would you say would be the proper footwork with a manual transmission? Because I see when I'm instructing, which is not coaching, by the way, I see a lot of people fumble with it. Like
specifically the heel toe downshifts?
They don't even do that. I mean, they're releasing the clutch in the middle of the turn or after the apex, which is always exciting. So
a little bit of a moment there.
Yeah, it's like whoa. Never thought to do that, but okay, that sounds.
There's a lot to think about there, right?
Yes. So and they get confused. And almost the timing seems to. They're more concerned about the timing than the turn, and every now and then they forget to turn the wheel. And I'm like, we need to go to the right here.
So playing that back, question is, arriving into a relatively big brake zone, just spent a long straightaway coming into a hairpin type corner. What's the footwork for braking and driving through this corner? Is that
pretty much.
Cool? Awesome. So arriving into a big brake zone, the first thing we're going to do is come off the throttle and brake. Number one is don't slowly lift off the throttle. Especially a lot of beginner drivers are like, oh shit, this feels deep. Let me kind of slowly come off of this, coast, and then show the brake, right? Now we've got two variables, or actually more than just two variables, right? If we're off the throttle braking, the variable is, where did I brake? If we are slowly coming off the throttle, we now have variables of where did you come off the throttle? How quickly did you come off the throttle? How long did you spend at this partial throttle? And by the way, our foot's very bad at feeling the difference between 20% throttle and 60% throttle, but that makes a very big difference. And we have the variable of where we're braking. So there's so many variables. You're doing that because you're probably feeling like you're braking really late and you get nervous. Back your brake zone up. Brake ridiculously early to start with. So brake ridiculously early, but come off the throttle and then brake. Limit the variables. One is when you ramp up to brakes, a lot of people will talk about like your first hit should be the hardest. Most people listening to this aren't driving a formula car or a prototype. They're driving a more production-based car. We want to be a little bit more progressive up to peak brake pressure. It's not easing into it, but it's a progressive add. So the peak brake pressure comes early in the brake zone. Okay, so I ramp up to peak brake pressure. Let's say I'm going to downshift from fifth to third gear. Okay, so now I'm on the brakes. Number one is what's the most important thing when we're getting ready to heel toe downshift? Is the braking, is not coming off the brakes, right? So I'm a big proponent of legitimate heel toe braking. So like the ball of your foot is on the brake pedal and you've got that nice angle for your foot, not trying to do the like left side of my foot on the brakes, right side of my foot on the throttle. And I speak from experience here. If someone's had it multiple times, my foot slip off the brake pedal, you don't want that. And it's much easier for that to happen when you do that. So my goal is before I hit the brakes, I pivot my knee in towards my right knee in towards the steering column. For anyone that's like sitting down, if you pivot your knee in, what does your foot do? It kind of naturally comes into the position of what you want. So knee pivot in, braking. As I get up to peak brake pressure, now it's time to downshift. Downshifting, clutch. As my hand's going down to the shifter, clutch in. I don't like to skip gears on downshifts for multiple reasons. It, again, the variability of trying to go fifth to third and the timing of that and how much you need to blip, and you get less reps for so multiple reasons. I don't like skipping gears. You should have plenty of time in any breaks to get all the gears in. So, we're going fifth to fourth. So clutch in, fifth. As I'm entering the fourth gear gate, blip the throttle, release the clutch back in, taking it out of fourth gear. As I start to go into the third gear gate, blip the throttle into third gear, off the clutch. All of that happens before the turn-in point. Even in a paddle shift car, I'm like never downshifting after the turn-in point. So if your clutch is in or you're downshifting after the turn-in point, something's wrong. And then at the turn-in point, I'm coming off the brakes. I'm going to coast for a bit, patient. And once I'm ready to unwind the steering wheel, quick ramp back up to full throttle. Most cars, I don't need my hands totally straight before I'm back to full throttle, but I'm pretty straight by that point. Hopefully that's made some sense.
So shifting done before turn in.
100%.
Okay. And trail braking. So you're off a full brake before turn in, but you could trail brake past.
Correct. Yeah. The how much brake pressure and how past the turning point and how long you're trail braking totally depends. The corner, the car, there's a lot of variance there. So that one's probably impossible to really talk about with any real insight. It's kind of like this whole coaching thing needs to be personalized,
Almost if there was a way. If there was a way. But the one thing I did see was they were doing threshold braking, and then they turned in and they were still doing threshold braking. And I was like, don't do that.
Did they actually come to a stop? Because I've heard from multiple instructors of a student like literally parking.
Almost. It felt like a stop. Yeah, I think like if you were the worst one I've ever had, student shall remain nameless because they're actually quite good now. Mid-Ohio, back straight, going into China Beach. They started braking at the 7. And I'm like sitting there going, that's just past the
right kink.
Yeah, the kink. And I'm like, oh, this is going to take a while. Okay.
Oh boy.
Okay. Can we
definitely had the fair share of drivers that drive faster on the highway than on the racetrack as well.
It was quite funny. Got a good kick out of it that night. It was fun.
Exactly.
So how about hitting target spots versus hitting target spots with correct car angle and weight loading?
Gosh, that's a hard one to answer.
I gave it to her.
Yeah. Ultimately here, what I can easily say is we always talk about where the apex is. What we often don't talk about is, well, what car angle do I want at the apex? So for example, kind of one of the bigger differences between pro drivers and most other drivers is pro drivers will tend to turn into a corner a little bit earlier, but with slower hands. And by turning in earlier, but slower, I don't apex any later. I'll have the same apex as someone that's turning later and harder. But if you think about the angles, my car angle at the apex will be slightly different. And then sort of one of the biggest areas that I've seen, pros to grassroots racers is where the pro gets out to exits and corner exits. It's one of those points that, we always say, hey, I use the exit curb. Imagine if we talked about our apex the same way. It was like, oh, I apex the apex curb. Like you'd be like, no, but like where on the apex curb? Exits are the same way. So oftentimes pro drivers will get out to the exit curb, two car lengths earlier than the grassroots racer. And it kind of comes down to knowing where on the exit curb I want to get out, and then working backwards to have the right car angle to point towards there, and I can get away with an earlier turning point. The earlier turning point means I have less of a sharp angle. That means I can roll in more entry speed. So essentially, don't just always think about apex points. Also think about car angles at apex points based on where you want to exit.
Okay. So we had one listener who contacted us coincidentally today, and they found out you were coming on, and they had a question. It's a 2-parter.
Oh no.
It's not multiple choice. So their question, because I think they're just about to make the big jump transition between novice to pretty good.
Nice. Awesome.
So
Go them.
exactly. It's fantastic. So the question was, if I get oversteer or understeer beyond where they're comfortable, does that mean that I just blew the turn?
No. That's you. I
I know why they're asking.
feel. Yeah, totally. So I would say I feel some level of oversteer or understeer in every single corner on the racetrack. If I don't feel one of those two things, I know, hey, I'm not close to the limit of the car. And one of the biggest mistakes I see grassroots racers making is saying, well, I know I'm going to get understeer here, so let me just start backing it down now. They're anticipating the understeer. Then you don't get to use weight transfer of the car. Drive the thing until it understeers, and then you manipulate the weight transfer. Obviously, I found that I need to always clarify things. I'm not teaching day one people that, right? So take this within reason. But when they're ready, picking the right corner, we're not doing this in the kink at Road America. We're doing this in the right corners, but we're starting to drive it until it understeers, manipulating off of it. That is, you blew the corner when you're missing apex points, when you're late back to full throttle, when your minimum speed comes in the wrong area. Sorry. Those are the things that I'm judging blowing corners, not understeer or oversteer.
Mm-hmm.
So you almost answered. You were going right there. You almost answered part B. They've heard about driving around understeer, and they have no idea how to do that or what that means.
So as a race car driver, and my coaching philosophy is to stay away from the math and the physics as much as possible, simplify things. But we all have to have a basic understanding of what are race car drivers doing? Like what matters to us in terms of speed? Everything, all of our inputs in the race car, our inputs are steering, turn in, like kind of release, throttle application, throttle release, brake application, brake release. All of those things affect where the weight transfers in the car. When you brake, we shift weight forward. When we accelerate, we shift weight back. When we turn to the left, our shift weight to the right. And then it's not a black and white, it is a grayscale, right? So the harder you brake, the more weight that goes to the front. The harder you accelerate, the more weight that goes to the rear. So when we have understeer, most causes is a lack of front grip. Well, it's always a lack of front grip relative to rear grip. Sometimes it's the rear is pushing the front. Most of the time, it's the front just not have enough grip. There's a saying that is true almost always, which is where the weight is where the grip is. So when I am dealing with understeer, what I'm thinking about as a race car driver is how do I get more weight on the front end? Because if I can get more weight on the front end, I've got more load on the front tires. Most times that should help the understeer. So if I use COTA as an example, is that a decent track to use as an example? Okay. Sure. So this is one we have turns 16, 17, 18 at COTA. The triple right-hander, which is almost any car not quite flat out. We're going to have a little lift. And in most cars, the first two apexes, you've got understeer because you're not fully lifting. You've got some load in the rear. So almost everyone's dealing with understeer. It's at least the first two apexes. What most drivers do is, hey, I'm going to have an understeer. Let me start my lift here and just kind of drive it on maintenance all the way through. What the pro does is say, let me stay flat until this stupid thing starts to understeer. And then what am I going to do is I'm going to come slowly off the throttle, not like ridiculously slowly, but slowly off the throttle. What's that going to do? It's going to shift weight on the front end. What should that do to the car? It should make the car rotate, right? So that's we use our feet to shift weight transfer forward and back. And that's just why we say we steer more with our feet than our hands.
Yeah, I still don't do that.
It takes a while. One step at a time. Let's at least get you having reference points first.
Yeah. I can do it in the long turns.
Those are the easiest corners to start with.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and just to experiment with it, right? Even like on a skid pad is a great place to experiment with that type of stuff.
It's such a good place to play.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish we had a skid pad. Can we get a skid pad in our backyard, Beck?
I don't think so, but I think that we can maybe just use your parking lot at work.
There we go.
I can talk to a guy.
Maybe put a sprinkler system out there.
Yeah, that would be fun. All right, Dion, we're not going to subject you to the full Fast and Furious story time to wrap this up, but we have one Fast and Furious story time question we have since the first time you came on, you haven't been subjected to. So if you would tolerate us, what is your race car number and why?
24. It's, I was just grew up, 24 was always my number. I was a Jeff Gordon fan. I don't know if it started from there. There was a few other players, like Ken Griffey Jr. is 24. When I was a big fan of his, I gravitated to that number, and it's been my number ever since. And it just so happened the year that we won the Rolex 24 Hour, our number was 24. So it's done pretty well for me.
I think it has.
Exactly.
So Dion, if people want to continue their Blaze subscription or start a Blaze subscription or just talk to you, where would they go?
The easiest thing, if you're an email person, just email me, Dion, Dion @blaze.io. It goes right to me. I'm happy to, give you the links, answer the questions, be helpful. So that's one. The other part would be just go into our website. If you could just go Google Blaze Coaching, will be the first thing that comes up, and it's we spell it a bit weird, BLAYZE. Stupid URLs and kind of get good URLs. It's kind of hard to do with normal common words, so we have to get creative here. So we're at blaze.io. So IO is like it's like a .com, but more California techie type of thing. So blaze.io. For car racing, it's blaze.io /car racing, car-racing. But just go to Google and type in like Blaze car racing or Blaze coaching. Our website will come up. We're also on all the social media stuff like Instagram, Blaze Motorsports, Facebook, Blaze Motorsports. Just type in BLAYZE coaching, you'll find us. And if you go to our website, we've also got like a little support, like those websites have a little chat button where you typically like a robot that just goes straight to me. I do all of our support as well. So if you want to talk to me, you can go to our website and use our little chat bubble, and I'll try to respond there pretty quickly as well. But go there, look it up. We're doing a $29 30-day trial, like it's literally $29. You can cancel anytime. We don't try to trick you into this. We're going to send you emails before the trial runs out and says, hey, if you want to cancel, you can cancel. We make sure we're going to do the right things there. Pick your dedicated coach. You get a live call with them, chat messaging, coaching with them, like the one-on-one coaching with them. You get all of this type of stuff, and you're going to love the program. We have an iOS mobile application. I apologize, Android people, but having two is really expensive. So the more people we have, maybe we can build an Android app, but we have literally, you can watch the coaching sessions, chat with your coach, purchase coaching sessions, upload video, watch everything you can do from our mobile application as well.
And you have, normal turnaround, but you also have special pricing if you need something quick.
Yeah. So, plenty of people, the drivers, the great thing is we have a lot of flexibility. Drivers use this in so many different ways. So kind of like those that are race weekend packages, well, we're not packages, but people using us on race weekends, a lot of times drivers will do what we do, schedule same day turnaround times. And we don't need, like, you can even do this tonight even, but we typically try to ask for like 24 hours heads up so your coach can get ready for you. But, let's say you've got a Friday, Saturday, Sunday race weekend, you schedule a coaching session Friday night. After practice that Friday, you upload your video, you'll get a coaching session back that night or early the next morning so that you can apply it for Saturday. I actually have some drivers that are sending me videos after each practice session on Friday. And as long as I know ahead of time, I can make myself available and do that. And it's super easy to do. Get it back that night. You've got coaching for the next day. And then a lot of times drivers will do that again Saturday night or after the race weekend. They'll upload their whole race from Sunday or Saturday, and they'll get racecraft coaching so that next time they go back to that racetrack, they've got that coaching session to study. So all of those, you've got your own driver dashboard. These coaching sessions are totally private to you. They live there forever. You go back, rewatch them anytime. Your coach is always there to ask questions as well. It's a really a great kind of hand-holding experience where you get access to literally the very best people on the planet when it comes to this sport.
Very nice.
So the two best things are the quality of the coaching, because I've never had a bad one, and the value of the coaching. The worst thing is the GoPro. Not your fault.
100%. Yeah, it is. GoPros are a nightmare. It is the bane of our existence, is having to deal with, I forgot to put the SD card in there, or it didn't turn on, or, all of those type of things. But if you've got some video, it doesn't need to be perfect. I know we've done probably, I think 3,000 or 4,000 coaching sessions to date. I've seen some pretty wild things. I've yet to have a video where I can't coach someone off of it. And I will be the first one to say, like, I got nothing, like I can't see something. Or I've had GoPros like mounted on the side of the car to the outside. You still find stuff to coach on. So technology is the bane of our existence, but it's also what makes their company. What do you know? But literally, if you're filming on your phone, you're filming on the GoPro, Smarty Cam, V boxes, if you want to upload data, you can upload data. We make it super flexible so that like whatever you got, if you're a sim racing driver, we've got drivers that send in sim racing footage between races to get more reps in. Like we work with everything.
Yeah. Would you prefer to have the driver in the shot, or would you prefer to have a clearer shot of the window?
The thing that matters the most is being able to see out front of the car. So if sometimes you mount the camera further back and it kind of like whitewashes because the camera can't focus, I would much rather be able to clearly see out front of the car. That I can kind of know what we're doing with the steering wheel at all times anyway, minus then like exactly where your hands are. For sure, the ultimate best is, that center mounted behind the driver where it's focused. The GoPro, you can like on the back screen, tell it where to focus, and you focus it outside. So as long as I can see outside the car, that's the most important thing. If I can see you two, great, but it's not that important.
Yep. And we've sent you Garmin footage. We've sent you GoPro footage. We've sent you Sentinel footage. So
exactly,
you don't care. It's fine.
I don't care. Although I must say I see the Garmin videos and I'm like, the Garmin, for whatever reason, hates slow motion video. We use slow motion video a lot, so it just drives me a little bit nuts. But it's a great tool. It makes it much more accessible.
Well, Dion, as always, until we bother you again and you foolishly respond with an email that we've sent you.
Hey, this was me bothering you guys this time.
That's okay. We'll get there. Dion, can't wait to see you again. And hopefully we'll bump into you on a track this year.
That's what I'm hoping for. Again, thank you guys for everything you do in the sport and just being a great part of the community as well. I know we all love having you guys in the paddock and love just the promotion that you do and the passion you put behind it. So don't stop. Keep it going. If we could be supporters of that anyway, don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Okay.
Well, until we get a perfect lap, Dion, we're here.
There we go.
We're going to be here for a while.
You and me both.
Exactly.
Thank
you, sir. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.
I'm trying to put together a sim racing set, and it doesn't have instructions.
Poor Bill. Bill.
Man. What sim racing thing did you get?
Rig metal, and then some Fanatec stuff.
Oh, cool. I haven't heard of rig metal before.
Yeah, he has assembled this thing 5 times. I'm not lying. And disassembled. It's
extruded aluminum.
Oh, cool.
So it's very rigid. I guess that's where the rig comes from. But the one I got doesn't come with instructions. So if you forget to put one of the little connectors inside the slider you have to take it all the way apart to get one back in. Vicky hasn't done it yet. She's been making fun of me. I said, okay, you take over.
Well, the thing is that there are instructions. They are online. So we're going to start there.
We'll see.
Yeah. But I haven't, honestly, since we moved in, we have had some people here every single weekend. Because we live near a ski mountain, so all the nieces and nephews, all the nieces have been coming up to use the ski mountain to go with the cousins and my kids. So that, and now this weekend is race weekend. Dion, I dropped an engine.
She did.
Oh, wow.
On purpose, not
I
by
pulled an
accident.
engine. Pulled an engine
on top of everything else right now.
Sure,
I did.
Why not? Right.
We're having a garage weekend this weekend.
Nice. That's
with
awesome.
friends. So we had to, me and our other mechanic, hold the engine, and that's a milestone for me. I looked at that thing. I'm like, this is not that hard.
It's not me.
We have a lift too, so we actually pulled it we just lifted the car off of it after we disconnected everything. So when they come, I have the other engine in the machine shop. I'm picking up Friday. It's not assembled, but the guys that are coming are going to show me how to assemble an engine.
Man, you're a badass. That's awesome.
I am so freaking excited. So what I did, and I'm just going to just like 2 more minutes. I'm sorry.
Dude,
I'm this is a big deal for me.
Yeah.
So what happened was that when we put our car in for racing before, it was a shtick that I just labeled a couple things that I kept forgetting in the car with a paint pen. And then I thought it was funny for Lemon. So I just went and labeled the entire engine, right? As a shtick. And then we gave out a book that was A is for alternator. Okay. And
awesome.
we did Fisher Price, because we're Fishers.
Yep.
Honda was a Fisher Price Honda. And we put like the dollar sign.
Your first Honda.
Our
Fisher
first
Price.
Honda.
Yeah.
I think it was Fisher Price. And we put like the dollar sign with price.
That's awesome.
But I didn't realize how fast I would learn that engine with that shtick.
You're literally writing it down, right? Like
I'm writing down I'm writing on the hoses, lower radiator hose, upper radiator hose, the
Spark plug
we're
wire.
all spark plug. Well, not only that, but
Everything.
distributor, labeled all the distributor stuff,
It's so fun when a little game turns into unbeknownst to you, a great learning exercise, right?
It really was. And then because I ran an all girls team who had no experience whatsoever with cars, and I was telling them what they needed to do in the engine, like check the fluids, check this, check that, but it was already labeled. So, and I'm just like, this is brilliant.
Every race team needs to do this. You need to make a little set that you can just label things really easily here.
Oh my gosh. So, that's when now they're telling me all this stuff that's going on. I'm like, I know that. And I'm going to have to take all the paint off.
Your 2 minutes is up.
I know. But then I did an order of removal so I could turn around and go in reverse to put it back.
It's awesome. That's so cool. And you know way more than I do about any of that stuff. I've never done any of that. That's awesome.
Oh my gosh, it was awesome. I'm sorry. I only did it like yesterday. So
yeah, she's still slightly pumped about it.
Give yourself.
I have the
year.
glow. I'm in the glow right now.
Keep that glow until every box in the house is unpacked. Let's
right.
just, revel in it.
or the engine starts. Either one. I'll take either one right now.